Thank you, Emma. And I think timing is everything on these things. So I think those years that you've mentioned this project has been going have been incredibly important. And I think the timing of this, when you chose today, couldn't have been. I mean, I don't know whether you knew that the new Prime Minister would be in place for one day, and there's talk of strikes and everything from barristers to postal workers to. So my goodness, the landscape is quite turbulent at the moment. But I was talking to a business owner yesterday who's run an SME in Cornwall since 2005, and she said that since 2007 she's been waiting for a normal year, and I think we can assume now that businesses are going to be in a constant state of flux, just the same as we all are in our personal lives and expectations. So I just thought I'd start with 10 minutes this morning on what is the landscape in Cornwall that the Inclusivity Project's been working alongside. Is it a good place for the Inclusivity Project to count as home? And what can we do about that to make inclusivity better? What can inclusivity do to make business better in Cornwall? So it's very symbiotic, and I hope that on the panel later we can get some real discussion around some of those elements. So I don't suppose you can read that at the back, but some of you will remember that when Cornwall was identified as a separate economic area back in the last days of the last century, it qualified for European structural and social funding. We were one of the poorest parts of Northern Europe, the poorest part of England, and it was pretty shameful. The second half of the 20th century did Cornwall no favours at all. So, the sort of first half of the 20th century, the whole world was in poverty. The second half, when the rest of the world benefited from the sort of boom in consumer products and so on, Cornwall was too far from the centres of population, didn't have the scale to benefit in that, so we got left further and further behind. And even our tourism and hospitality offering, we lost sight of how good that could be. So it was a pretty sorry place at the end of the last century. So we qualified for European funding, and we've had 23 years of that now. And we've seen some great successes, the universities being established here being a key one, superfast broadband, some of the great infrastructure projects and so on. And yet there's people still living in very poor housing, ill-educated in certain parts of the county. And those are the sort of people we need to include in the next realm of prosperity creating, whatever that might look like. So at the moment in Cornwall, there are about 26,000 VAT-registered businesses, all of them, bar a handful really, SMEs, and with all the challenges that brings, all the opportunities and excitement and innovation and so on as well, but all of the challenges that living on small margins and how that affects the inclusivity agenda creates. So I think that's worthy of some discussion. How do you become a greener, a more inclusive employer when you're struggling to make ends meet? And at the moment, I'm old enough to remember running a business myself in inflationary times. It's very difficult not to talk ourselves into a recession by holding up decisions, by not making that higher, by not making that investment and so on. So, it's a real challenge for discussion, I think, at the moment. And the interesting thing, as well as the 26,000 VAT-registered businesses, there are an estimated 35,000 micros and sole traders operating below the annual turnover of 85,000 when you have to register for VAT. And in these days when we think everything's data-driven, we do not know what industries these businesses are in. It's quite bizarre that there's people doing everything from making knitted seagulls at your kitchen table, right up to international sort of automotive consultancy in that micro section there. The other horrific stat, which still applies to Cornwall last time it was measured, is that the UK, out of the G7 countries, the UK's productivity is the 6th worst, could be 7th by some figures. And the reason that's credited with being so bad is that in the UK we've thrown cheap labour at problems rather than investing in automation, AI in its widest sense, and robotics and so on and so forth. And that is causing some real stresses at the moment because you know, the 600,000 people during the pandemic left the workforce in the UK, so we've got a real shortage here. So we're having to catch up in investment terms. We're having to get the opportunity of inclusivity that offers is that, you know, because the normal workforce is perhaps reduced, we've got to look at more flexible ways of including older people, people who are vulnerable and can't come into the office 9 till 5 but would do a project from home or whatever. So I think this actually is an opportunity to help the inclusivity agenda if we're not careful. Wages are still £5,000 less than the national average. And there was, because of the population in Cornwall, a historic lack of diversity, but that is improving all the time. So it's an interesting moment for us. So at the moment, there are some pockets of real opportunity. You know, we're still, as the last slide said, we're still heavily dependent on high intensive labour industries like hospitality, care, retail, agriculture, but there are some really exciting areas springing up now. Some of those that are mentioned in the first bullet point there, software, creative and technology, which the universities are really helping to develop, and some 21st century hero sectors, which we're only on the first stage of at the moment. So these are things which are going to make Cornwall, I think, we're on the cusp in Cornwall of the next golden era for us, really. So there's some really exciting opportunities in renewable energy, in software development, in geothermal, in floating offshore wind, et cetera, which we're really going to be leading the country on. So some exciting opportunities for the future, which of course include inclusivity in the widest sense, but also the sort of people that we need in there are much more flexible in the lines that I was saying a little bit about earlier. So we at the Chamber of Commerce now are working with Cornwall Pride, morning Matthew, with Black Voices Cornwall, with Marcus is here. Surge is our group of under 30s, so we're really encouraging people to stay in Cornwall if they've been brought up here and create a job well-paid job in one of those sectors there, or if the universities have brought them here for the first time, then to stay, work here, set up the business here, and have their families here. So that's exciting. We're sponsors of the Cornwall events of West Country Women Awards, and of course Claire Harris is here. Cornwall was a beacon project as far as inclusivity was concerned several years ago, and we've worked with the public sector to make sure that we're really championing some of the things that some of the opportunities that we've got here. I think we've really got the landscape in which we can be inclusive in that really generous sense, that really spiritual sense of that, because we all have huge pride in the place that we live and work in when we're in Cornwall, and I think that encourages good behaviour amongst us. I remember, you know, people like Roland Tiplady at Ward Williams Associates, who set up in Truro. They had offices in Manchester, London, Doha and Riyadh, and he said Cornwall is the most difficult place to do business in the world, because if you screw up here, everybody knows about it. So, you know, it does keep us honest, doesn't it? And I think that sort of collective sense, that easy collaboration which we find at the Chamber of Commerce in businesses wanting to help each other, and in particularly younger people who've been brought up in an internet era of open access information, they're used to sharing stuff. You know, that is the natural state of mind. I think Cornwall really encapsulates that sort of modern, forward-looking state of mind, which is so important in this inclusivity agenda. Cornwall Council was the first local authority to declare a climate emergency. The Chamber of Commerce has just started this month as Planet C. C can stand for Cornwall, it can stand for Chamber, it can stand for Celebration, it can stand for Challenges, whatever you think. And there's also slightly tongue-in-cheek, there's that phrase about we need to look after this planet because there's no Planet B. Well, there's Planet C now, so you can hopefully get involved in that, and we can share some of the opportunities together on that one. And within that Sustainability September, that Planet C programme of events that we've organised in September, is the carbon literacy training course. So we're putting 200 people completely free of charge through a carbon literacy course, which is approved by the National Carbon Literacy Project. And that will enable those people who participate in that to get a certificate, so they've been through that course. Hugely beneficial if you're young and you want something additional on your CV. It's completely free of charge, and there are a few spaces left. So if anybody's not signed up for that, and you can do it as one block of 8 hours, it's an 8-hour course, or you can do 1 hour here, 1 hour there, as suits your working life and personal life. So that's something to bear in mind of. And I think that sort of carbon literacy is the sort of thing which the inclusivity agenda has in mind, in terms of, when we're looking forward together to everybody being a better citizen, a better colleague in the workplace. These are the sort of qualities which hopefully people can bring. Also in Sustainability September is Good Fest. That's taking place in Cornwall as well. Another sign of how everybody wants a sort of good business behaviours in Cornwall, because that's what's going to see us right. And I know that Stacey at Accounts is working on a good business charter. We at the Chamber of Commerce are working on some values. When you join the Chamber of Commerce, you sign up to some values, and I think inclusivity will be at the top of those lists. So I think there's a really good framework in which this project can start. Some of you may not yet be aware that there's this global conference taking place at Eden Project 2nd to the 4th of November called Anthropy. And that is the lineup of speakers and discussion topics there will make Cornwall again absolutely world leading. I'm thrilled that this is taking place at the Eden Project. It's a conference, Anthropy meaning mankind. What does humanity need to do to save the planet now? And that's taking place here in Cornwall as a starting point. So there's lots of things to get excited about, and I think that this just as I say, it's just the start of what Cornwall can bring to the business agenda looking forwards. So next 6 months, let's face it, are going to be a bit challenging. I'm old enough to have run a business during inflationary times, and as I say, it's you need some different business practices. You mustn't, for example, offer fixed price contracts if all your supplies are going to be increasing in price and your labour force is increasing in price. You can't promise to deliver that contract at a fixed price. So there's new business behaviours going to be needed to cope with the energy crisis, the other pressures on the supply chain, the horrific war in mainland Europe, labour shortage ongoing. What are we going to do to invest in, as I say, automation and AI? It's going to be a challenge, and we need to all work together, share our collective wisdom on that. Longer term, what we in the business community would like to see, and I'm not a great believer that the government, they need to set up a framework in which business can prosper, and an open and inclusive government is going to help the inclusivity agenda in business. And I guess the interesting fact that Liz Truss, in her 4 great positions around her, have not got a white man, does say something from a national point of view of what inclusivity might look like to all of us. And whilst we all have our various opinions on those 4 people as individuals, I think as a collective that does say something about what the UK's direction and the employment workspace here should look like. And I hope that Cornwall can be inspired by that new government, even if we're not in agreement with all of what they might be standing for. But anyway, let's wait and see. Let's only been there less than a day, haven't they? So give them a chance, I suppose. But I'm really hoping that tomorrow, at the latest, they come up with some energy policy, not only for people and households, but actually, from my point of view, from small businesses. It's causing an awful lot of grief at the moment. And as I say, hospitality being one of our huge sectors, they're high energy users, and I've heard some horror stories about the increase in price that they're going to be charged. Unless there is a policy, we're going to see swathes of small businesses either going bust or deciding to close for the winter or whatever. So that needs absolute urgency. Longer term, levelling up. It was a great phrase of Boris's, wasn't it? But did anybody actually specify what it was going to mean? I think in Cornwall, not only did we get less business support, which is my major gripe, but we've got less health and social care spending, we've got worse infrastructure to enable the thing to work out. So what does levelling up actually mean? And I've written already to Liz Truss to say, what does levelling up mean? Please, can we have some specifics that places like Cornwall can really hang our confidence on in the coming months, that we're going to get some benefit from this? Nice phrase. I completely agree with the spirit of levelling up, but what does it actually mean in terms of spending? The Shared Prosperity Fund, Cornwall, and we've got Mark Dudridge from the LEP here, who's done wonders in getting Cornwall high on the Shared Prosperity Fund agenda. You've probably heard from several speakers in the last few weeks. It's 132 million, and whilst that isn't anything like what we used to get under the EU scheme, because it comes with fewer constraints, I'm very optimistic that we can really make that work for Cornwall. And I think the fact that it can be controlled by, people like this room here today, determining what we need to do with that money, I think there's a real opportunity for that to move the dials on Cornwall's prosperity over the coming years. So it's up to everybody to understand what the Shared Prosperity Fund priorities are. If you go on goodgrowthhub.com, you'll find out exactly what is needed, and get your applications in. I think the next deadline, Stacey, is 2nd of December now, is it? So you've got plenty of time now to think, collaborate. I've already talked to Emma Bland this morning about something that Exeter University and Cornwall Chamber of Commerce will be working together on. So plenty of time to get your right applications in, and the things which are really going to move the dials for Cornwall's picture over the coming years. And those new sectors I referred to earlier, with the support of the LEP, are really going to, I think, position Cornwall as a hotbed of 21st century businesses. So we're lobbying hard. I want you all to think about doing that from your points of view. We're looking to new markets around the world. Chambers of Commerce, British Chambers of Commerce have 83 accredited chambers in key export markets. So although Europe's a bit more difficult with bureaucracy at the moment, there are plenty of opportunities and lots of SMEs in Cornwall looking at new global markets. I think that attitude, which Cornwall used to have, it was only the latter half of the 20th century, which made us a little bit inward looking. We used to be the great trading part of the UK. I mean, the Phoenicians came here and traded tin for pasties or whatever it was 3,000 years ago. So we've got a big long track record of Cornwall being an outward looking nation that really does, and it really helps the inclusivity attitude, I think. So let's do that. And let's, in all these troubled times, Emma saying, like me, I'm excited to be out and about with people. Let's not forget the customer. Who are the customers? In the great smart working revolution, Ruth's here this morning, new ways of working, going to be more inclusive in all sorts of ways. Let's keep our eyes on what the 21st century customer and client of Cornwall and beyond is going to look like. So that's about it from me, really. I'm on the panel, I think, later on. So I really hope a few things there have sparked a few thoughts, questions, and criticisms, I expect, and follow-ups and so on and so forth. But look forward to talking to you all later on. Thanks for listening. Cheers.